I was Y for a very long time. I did try out the new KU, like when it first came out, but I was very well known as a wide author on, like, say, the K boards and stuff. I have a lot of problems with page reads and things like that. I did try Kindle Unlimited again during the pandemic. I actually did a release in 2021, and I made a third of the money I did on my release in December of that same year, KU versus being Y. And I do sell my books at $9.99, which is different for most indies as well. And that's because I write in a niche genre. And I've been trying to teach people that if your genre doesn't have as big of an audience, you can increase your price point because you're not going to move as much inventory. You're going to have lower volume.
Welcome to the Stark Reflections on Writing and Publishing podcast. There has never been a better time for writers. More information, options, and opportunities are available to you, but navigating these requires insight. Join Mark Leslie Lefebvre as he draws upon more than a quarter century of experience as a writer, a bookseller, and a trusted book industry consultant to explore and reflect on the writing and publishing landscape to help you make informed choices on your writer journey.
Hello, Reflectives, and welcome to episode 265 of the Stark Reflections podcast. This is your host, Mark Leslie Lefebvre. In today's episode, I have a conversation with Elizabeth Ann West and Randall Wood. Elizabeth Ann West is not only the public face of Scribecount, but as an author, her books have hit the bestseller lists on all major vendors, including Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Apple Books, Google Play, and Kobo. Randall Wood is the author of the best-selling Jack Randall thrillers and co-founder of Scribecount, a platform with the desire to be the preeminent author service platform, offering services every author needs. Now, the three of us have a fantastic conversation about their lives as writers. Obviously, we talk a lot about Scribecount and how they leverage Scribecount, so there's some behind-the-scenes stuff, some new developments with Scribecount. But what I love about these two folks is, I know them through the writing community. They're awesome people. But the fact that they are authors themselves, and they have that very author-centric approach. They're authors first, and they have an author-first platform in Scribecount. And we talk about all of that and more coming up later in this episode. But first, let's hear a word from this episode's sponsor. This episode is sponsored by Findaway Voices. Did you know that the audio industry is growing? And that's many thanks to the authors fueling that growth by writing great books that people love to listen to. The audiobook market saw 74,000 audiobooks published in 2021, and revenue grew 25% to $1.6 billion, marking the 10th straight year of double-digit growth, according to the latest APA, Audio Publishers Association, report. Authors using Findaway Voices have contributed a significant amount of titles and growth to the industry. This continuous trend is great news for indie authors and publishers, especially those in the romance genre, which the APA reports has the most growth with a 75% increase in revenues, followed by self-help, 34%, and science fiction, 32%. Of course, the growth is across the industry, across multiple genres, and Findaway Voices is committed to help pushing the acceleration of the entire industry with tools, reach, and opportunities to authors all over the world. And if you're interested in seeing how you can leverage Findaway Voices and all the many options and choices and tools that they offer, you can check them out over at starkreflections.ca/Findaway. And now, some comments from recent episodes. So over on Twitter, Edwin Downward said, caught the first episode from When Words Collide and hardly agree with your reflection on finding our community. I went a long time not even knowing how vibrant the local writing community was, and can only wonder where my writing career would be if I had known. Thanks for that comment, Edwin. And Edwin was commenting on episode 263, which are the keynotes from When Words Collide, and this episode was the keynotes from Terry Brooks and Susanna Kearsley. And I found a commonality in community that I reflected on, and it's just so valuable. It's so important. A, understanding that you're not alone, and B, of course, just realizing just how dynamic and how many resources exist within those other people in our community where we can help and support and learn from each other and grow together. So thanks for that comment, Edwin. And also, Edwin, thanks for the other comment over on Twitter, which is not related to this podcast, but to another podcast of mine. He said, I bought the book Lover's Moon by Mark Leslie and Julie Strauss to support the authors, but what I'm really enjoying is the podcast where each of them is reading the chapters they wrote. Edwin went on to comment that there seemed to be a technical glitch in a couple of episodes where there's this big blank space at the end. And thanks, Edwin. I fixed that blank space. I went back and updated it. I realized it was just as I was copying from a previous episode, there was just blank space left there. And I don't know how that happened or how I missed it. So thanks for pointing that out. And I'm so glad you're enjoying Lover's Moon. It is a challenge because I already have this weekly podcast that has at least one episode a week. Every once in a while, as you may have noticed, I sneak in an extra episode, and that's a lot of work. And then doing this editing for Lover's Moon is really difficult because, even the episodes that Julie reads, I'm doing the dialogue for Michael, so it's not just taking the reading and producing it and getting it out there. It's going in and re-editing it. So, as Julie reads her chapters, for example, she'll read the dialogue for Michael, but then I go back in, add an additional track, silence the Michael speaking bits, and then read the dialogue. And then every once in a while, depending on, because it sounds slightly different than in the text, sometimes I'll remove the he said or whatever, because it just sounds better when you hear the two of them in conversation together. So it's a slightly altered version of the book, so we're kind of editing on the fly as we do it. It's so much extra work, but it is so darn fun. So why don't I cut here and get into a personal update. So if you want to leave comments for episodes, you can leave them over at starkreflections.ca for any episode, or you can also leave the comments on Twitter at Mark Leslie. So in continuing from the personal update that I just started to ramble into in the comments, yeah, Lover's Moon was an absolute blast to write with Julie. And later today, August 25th, 2022, when I'm recording this, Julie and I have a meeting to discuss the next book in the series, Hex in the City. Now, Julie has been an editor I've worked with and a consultant as well, like a developmental consultant, like kind of hammering out story ideas. Obviously, she's a really good friend as well, so I'm always bouncing ideas off of her. But she's invested a lot of time and energy in this world with me, and even to write Lover's Moon, we did a lot of brainstorming and a lot of world building, like just enhancing the world and enhancing more about Gail's background. And you're going to get more into Gail's background in Hex and the City. And so basically the meeting we're having is to discuss whether or not I'm hiring her as a consultant to help me with Hex and the City, or whether she's willing to co-author Hex and the City with me. Now, it's not going to be a romance. Obviously, there will still be the romantic underlying story of Michael and Gail's relationship, but it's going to go back to action, adventure, thriller territory. And I am not sure if this novel is going to be written from Michael's point of view only, or if it's going to be alternating points of view from Gail. And it's kind of because in this particular novel, Michael and Gail have to do something, and they can't do it together. So Gail's going to be doing some stuff over here, and Michael's going to be doing some stuff over there. And so one of the challenges I run into is if it's only told from Michael's point of view, you're not going to see what's going on with Gail, and you're only going to get that third party. And in all the previous novels, you only saw Gail through Michael's twisted, biased perspective. So you didn't understand what she was thinking, what she was feeling. Even though he could sense her emotions, he didn't realize the complexity of what was going on there. And so that's the challenge. I don't know if I want to write from Gail's point of view for those chapters. And I know Julie did such a brilliant job bringing Gail's voice to life that's the question. Now, the only question is if Julie has time to do this, because I know she's a phenomenal editor, a phenomenal writer, and she's got some really great book projects that I'm dying to read, and I don't want to take her away from writing the books of hers that I love, but I also really, really want to work with her on this. So this is kind of where I've been stuck lately, and that's sort of what's going on in personal update. The only other thing in terms of a personal update is that I have returned to finishing off the work for the Canadian Mounted. Now, I had this book about maybe 60% complete. Most of the book has just been notes and scattered pieces. So now I'm kind of throwing it together and adding more elements. And the Canadian Mounted is it's the prop book, although it was a real book that John Candy was holding in the movie Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. And this year is the 35th anniversary of the release of the movie Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. And I've loved the movie. I think I've probably seen it more than 35 times. And the Canadian Mounted, my version of the Canadian Mounted, is going to be a sort of a nod to a tribute book, trivial details about the movie. For people like me who absolutely love this movie, love John Candy, John Hughes, Steve Martin, etc., etc. And so as part of further research, I've got like, a half dozen books. I've got articles, and I've got the original manuscript that would have made the movie run 6 or 9 hours or something like that. And then, of course, the other morning, Liz was getting ready for work, and she comes into my office just to say goodbye. And she goes, "What are you doing?" And so I was sitting there with my headphones on, and I'm watching an interview. David Letterman interviewed Ryan Reynolds in May. And in this interview, Ryan talks about the book The Canadian Mounted and how he had it made as a fake prop book to be used in one of the Deadpool movies. And so I wanted to quote from that interview. So there I am sitting there watching. I said, I am working because part of the work is the research, watching David Letterman interview the awesome Ryan Reynolds. So I thought that was kind of fun. It's like, yes, I realize when things like that happen, I realize just how awesome my job as a writer can be. Because, watching an interview with Ryan Reynolds or John Candy or John Hughes or whatever is research. It's research. I love it so much. But anyways, the Canadian Mounted comes out in October, and I'm so thrilled with that. But of course, as I mentioned, Julie and I are going to plan out Hex in the City, which I have to get written ideally by the end of the year, get that done. Maybe it's a November thing, November, December, so that the editing can happen in early 2023 and that book can come out. Those are two of the projects in the works. Also, in terms of other personal stuff, I've got a backlog of nonfiction, true ghost story projects that I really, really want to get going. Also, I had to change. I'm not sure if I've talked about this, but in relation to doing stuff at my local public library, my hometown public library in Onaping Falls, Ontario, is I've expanded the Creatures in the Library anthology project because I haven't gotten any submissions yet, and I wondered if I made it too restricted, so I changed it. It was meant to be for young people, and I capped it at the age of 21, but I changed that cap to 25. And I also expanded it not just to be people who live in the community, because let's be honest, there's maybe only, 5,000 people who live in that community? And so I expanded it to anyone who has a relationship to the community. So, for example, and this, my son is not a writer, but because I grew up in Levack, my son, who has a connection to that, his grandmother lived in Levack, he visited the town, twice a year, regularly for years and years and years. I mean, my mom's door, the garage door has this height chart, which, before we sell the house, we're going to be removing the door and bringing it. Liz has a plan to make it into something special that we can use. But yeah, this is his height from when he was, age whatever to, beyond the height of the actual door, because that's how tall he is now. So yeah, anyone with a connection to the town. So, children or grandchildren of people who grew up in the town, if they can demonstrate a connection, they can be in that. And there's details of that. There'll be a link for anyone who just may have a connection to the town. And the connection can't be, well, I know Mark and he grew up in Levack, Ontario. It'll be over at markleslie.ca/creatures in the library. Or if not, there'll be a link in the show notes at starkreflections.ca. But that's it. That's it for my rambling introduction. Why don't we get to the interview with Elizabeth and Randall? Elizabeth, Randall, welcome to the Stark Reflections podcast.
Hello.
Hello. Good to see you again, Mark.
Yeah, it's good to see both of you guys again. And I don't think, I've had either one of you on the Stark Reflections podcast. I have had Scribecount, but I haven't had you two. So I'm really, really excited to basically get off now. I did read your bios at the beginning of the podcast, but I know, Randall, you wanted to take the time to introduce Elizabeth and her cool new title and all of the things. So you want to jump right into that?
Well, a little bit. I mean, I think most people do know her already, but for those who don't, she has been an indie since, geez, way back, probably in the dark ages when the two of us got started.
Mhm.
I think I met you at the very first NINC conference, and we'd been talking online before that, K-boards and various other places. And I just said, boy, if I see her at the conference, I've got to tell her about this idea I have. And things progressed from there. And you want to tell the story of how we got you on board here?
So first of all, he teased me because I had 2 notebooks at the time. He still likes to tease me about that I always keep 2 notebooks. Like, no, this
Wait
one
a
is so I
second.
can.
Is that a NINC? Is it a NINC thing? Because
Okay, other people understand this, and he can say, one notebook I will tear pages out. The other notebook pages do not get torn out of. So that's why I always have 2
I
notebooks.
see that. That's nice. One's pristine, and the other one's.
Yes.
You know what? That's
Something I
really,
thought.
really brilliant. Yeah.
Being
this is why-
ex-military, my first thought was, she's Harriet the Spy.
No.
Harriet the Spy.
No. But we were literally at the Flying Bridge, the bar right there by the pool, and having cocktails. And we had the notebooks and then also napkins, and we're like drawing it out. And we literally argued over the Chiron for the news because he's like, we're going to have the news thing. And I'm like, do we need to? But it's still there. It's there on Scribecount. So I went home from that conference and told my ex-husband, he's not my ex-husband, babe, I've got this new job. I'm going to be marketing and stuff. He's like, mm-mm. So I kept Scribecount. I got rid of the husband.
Good choice.
So, but I was just teaching this summer at the National Conference for RWA. I was teaching about math is money for business.
Right.
And I mentioned to Randall, I'm like, hey, I name drop Scribecount and showed them so it would be easier for them to have reports. And it just kind of worked out. I mean, it really did kind of work out that Philippa has a great new opportunity and I was able to come on board. So we're trying to make it as seamless as possible, I think, for the transition. So, and I'll be at all the conferences this fall.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Now, before we get into Scribecount and some of the cool things I know you're going to be sharing with me that are forthcoming or about to be launched, let's talk a little bit about you guys as writers and your background as writers, because I want people to understand that this is not some corporate whatever coming in from outside the industry. These are people who understand this from the bottom up. Randall, let's start with you, your background as in writing and et cetera, and how that led to Scribecount.
Oh, well, just a latchkey kid, prolific reader. As you see, I have quite the library. Probably about 5,000 books there. And just kind of started writing in high school as a hobby. And then I joined the military for about 6 years and a lot of special things. And that gave me the background to step into military thrillers. And that's primarily what I write is the political, military, Tom Clancy kind of genre. And then I also have a background in the medical field. I got into emergency medicine after I left the Army. Well, actually, before I left the Army. And spent quite a career in that, which gave me a lot of background I could draw on for medical thrillers. So mine are kind of a mix. I do the James Bond kind of stuff, and then I'm also into the Tess Gerritsen stuff over here, Michael Palmer, that kind of thing. So it was just a hobby that I did as between calls. You know, I was writing books between, going on strokes and heart attacks and things of that nature. And one day I made the mistake of leaving a manuscript that I'd printed off. I was editing in my lazy boy at the station, at a fire station. And I came back and the guys had commandeered it. And if you've ever been to a fire station, there's a row of lazy boys in front of a big screen, and the screen was off and they were reading a page, pass it down.
Really?
And yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. And I said, guys, that's not ready yet. Give it back. Well, yeah, like I'm going to get it back from 10 huge firemen. So one of the guys afterward, one of the chief actually pulled me aside. He says, man, that was really good. You need to send that in. You know, I should get published. So I sent it in to a few people and, got the usual rejections. And one day got a email from a woman named Melissa Singer. And I said, I should know that name, but I was on my way out the door. I said, I'll check it later. And the next day, my girlfriend at the time said, what about that email you had? Oh yeah, I got to check it. Who is this lady? Let me Google her. Oh, she's vice president of tour.
Oh,
Maybe I should answer her. So her and I went back and forth and, tried to come up with a deal. But this was just around the time where self-publishing was taking off. And I was reading George Conrath and printing off his blog. And I remember I stacked it up and I was actually using it for a doorstop because it was 8 inches tall by the time I printed it all up.
What, his blog or your
Yeah,
manuscript?
his blog. I was just printing off, a whole month's worth at a time and reading it. But I decided to forego the tour deal and go with indie. And I hooked up with a guy named Derek Murphy, who you may have heard of now.
Oh yeah.
He was just a cover artist getting started back then, and he still has done all my cover art for me. And he's been a great friend through the process. And I think it was 2011, maybe I made the leap to wide. And that's where the idea for Scribecount really started to take place, because I realized how much time I was spending
Looking at all the dashboards,
looking at reports and everything. And then other people, Book Report happened and they said they were going to expand. I said, okay, well, they're already started. I'll let them. And I waited and it didn't happen. And I said, I'm tired of waiting. So launched Scribecount, found a friend who was a good developer, and he had lots of classmates that were willing to help. And that's primarily what our people are, really. It's my lead developer his resume is 8 pages long. And he just called his school buddies and said, hey, I'm building this cool thing. You want to help me? And that's the majority of our people are just old classmates of his. So it's worked out great because, they have a great, communication and everything. And we're just trying to get to that point where, we launched the MVP. We launched, I wanted to launch with at least 7 platforms and expand out until we were ready to really scale it up and do it. And we got sidetracked on some tools here and some tools there, but it's basically grown pretty close to what we envisioned. As soon as we have audio, Ingram, and some more ad tracking, I'll start considering it complete. And then everything else will be just bonus stuff,
Yeah.
But it's really hard because we have for the last year and a half, it's been me reaching out to other platforms. Hey, can we include you in our system? Hey, now we have people calling us.
Yeah.
So I have this jam-packed schedule for development. And then somebody comes along and says, hey, I'd love to be a part of Scribecount, and I'll even write code to help you do it. How do I say no to that guy? And this is how we had our latest upgrade, which was Damon Courtney, Book Funnel.
Yeah.
He actually approached Philippa, or she approached him. I can't remember. They'll probably argue it, but he was willing to help us with code and make it seamless as possible. And we did have one hiccup. We underestimated the amount of historical data, and that took us probably another week or so here. But we just uploaded that to the system, so now your book funnel should work. And it should pull all your historical data back to the end of the time.
Okay, cool.
And
I have some questions about potential
Sure.
blue sky vision, but I want to go back first and get Elizabeth's superhero origin story as an author, and see how you got into that, which obviously led to Scribecount.
My origin story on being a businesswoman is actually I killed my mother's rubber tree plant at 8 years old. I was I was going to make rubber balls in the sink. This is before the internet, before I always wanted an encyclopedia so bad as a kid. That's all I ever wanted. And we didn't have the money for that. So the first encyclopedia I had was actually on a Grolier disc, a CD-ROM. And I was so excited. But
I sold
my
those
dad,
in the bookstores.
I know. My dad, I asked him how do they make rubber? And he goes, oh, they take the leaves off, they cut it up and boil it down. That is not how they make rubber at all. There is sap involved, people. But dad, being dad, is not going to admit he doesn't know. And I'm 8 asking. But if you remember those little bouncy balls when we were kids that were super popular.
Oh yeah.
I was going to sell those at school and make $1 million. I'd read Toothpaste Millionaire. I was going to be a millionaire in 3rd grade. That was the plan. Mm-hmm. And then Babysitters Club books. I took that as a business plan. So I had 2 other girls that I had their phone numbers, and we used all the ink on the printer to put flyers in people's houses. So I was literally like a big babysitter when I was a teenager. So those are my business origins. Okay. And then I married the military, and we moved to San Diego. And on the way to San Diego, we got orders back to the East Coast. So I tried to start a business being like an administrative assistant. This is 2007. and there was a link that said, write articles for money. Well, if this costs me anything, I'm not going to do it. It ended up being the thing that turned into Yahoo Contributor Network. So I wrote my first article. They paid me $7 for it. And I got $1.50 for every 1,000 people who read it. So my origins for writing, actually, apart from college newspaper and all of that jazz, was writing SEO articles for websites in 2007 to 2010.
Wow.
So 2011 rolls around. March 25th is my birthday. And that's also a very auspicious day, March 25th, 2011, because Barry Eisler walked away from a 6-figure deal to become an indie. And the reason I remember that is because I'm sitting there folding laundry, listening to Be the Monkey, Not the Frog. Don't look up the video. Do not look up the video for what that means. But it's Joe Conrath and Barry Eisler, and they're talking about all the skills you need to be an indie. And as they're checking it off, I'm realizing I had been working in the open source. Like I was a documentation writer for Fedora project, for One Laptop per Child. I did a lot of volunteer work for it. I'm not a coder, but I'm somebody who can, there's no tech or software that I haven't been able to solve or figure out. So I always like to do new things. So I was like, well, I can make my own website. I've already done that. I understand SEO. I understand Google ads. I understand search rankings. I understand all this stuff. That was 2011. That was back when we were still hiring formatters to make our ebooks because there was no easy way to make so I learned how to format ebooks, and I had a side business doing that.
HTML coding and all the,
yeah. So 2011, I published Canceled. Its claim to fame is that it once upon a time got to #2 in the whole free store with a BookBub. It would have been #1, but Les Mis had a movie that week. Les Mis came out as a movie. So I started to realize that, yes, people can get BookBubs, but not every book that gets a BookBub gets to #2. So I started to kind of realize that maybe there was something to this. And I moved away from contemporary romance after being a book marketer for 3 years. And in 2014, I released what I'm now, I guess, known for is Jane Austen fan fiction, because it was my favorite genre to read. It was my escape hatch. When the toddler was screaming, Josh had deployments and duty and everything, I was pulling out books for 1812 England and going back to a different time zone, basically, or time era in my head. Wow. And I was wide for a very long time. I did try out the new KU, like when it first came out, but I was very well known as a wide author on, like, say, the K boards and stuff. I was very vocal about, I have a lot of problems with page reads and things like that. Yeah. I did try Kindle Unlimited again during the pandemic. I actually did a release in 2021, and I made 1/3 of the money I did on my release in December of that same year. KU versus being wide. And I do sell my books at $9.99, which is different for most indies as well. And that's because I write in a niche genre. And I've been trying to teach people that if your genre doesn't have as big of an audience, you can increase your price point because you're not going to move as much inventory. You're going to have lower volume.
I mean, you're also appealing to an audience that's probably not as voracious. They still read voraciously, but not 5 books a day. And they're going to,
they do. The difference is, and this is going to sound so bad, we're women with money. We are older women.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah. So
also used to spending money on traditionally published books that are a ripoff at $18 and $24. So your books are still an incredible deal.
Not to mention, the other reason that my books are an incredible deal is because the trad publishers pulled out of my genre. So 2003, the movie was there. There's no content. They literally yanked the contracts at the end of 2009, 2010. So I started writing and realizing, like, if I want to make a career of this and I want to be around year after year after year, which I'm coming up on 10 years in JAF here very soon, I've got to make sure that it's a business model that works for both me and my readers. So.
Right. Wow. So both of you, it's really important for you to understand where your sales are coming from. Keep an eye on it, but not waste a lot of time logging onto dashboards. And the reason I'm saying this is a segue for you guys to please share with my listeners. For those who kind of maybe have an idea what Scribecount is, but don't know what Scribecount is, what's your elevator pitch for what Scribecount is for authors?
I really don't have one because it's constantly evolving. What I would mostly say is we are a sales report aggregator. We will collect all your reports, consolidate them, and make them readable. That's the main thing, is what do I do with spreadsheets? If you're not an Excel expert, it's hard to pivot tables, and that, a lot of people just don't even know what a pivot table is. So I said, we got to simplify this. We got to make it visual. And I don't want to see a spreadsheet unless I absolutely have to, or I want to.
Right,
and those are
right.
two different things, so I had to specify that as well. But basically, I want to see information that I can make decisions from, and I want to do it quickly. If it takes me more than a few hours to do it, sometimes it's already antiquated. It's too late to really make a good decision on some of the stuff you see. So that's what Scribecount does. Number one is we save you time. Number two is we keep our finger on the pulse of your sales for you. You don't have to constantly be checking things. We will let you know.
Right.
We kind of safeguard some of your information too. We monitor your KU status. We monitor your prices for changes. So if some piracy happens, or a box got clicked or it didn't click, we're not sure, we will let you know. So there's that. I know a lot of people who log into certain platforms just to make sure stuff like that isn't happening.
Right.
And to me, that's just a colossal waste of time. You shouldn't have to do that. So we're doing it for you. More platforms constantly, but more ad platforms is coming up. We are adding some next week here. Well, I shouldn't say next week, very soon. Remember that, Mark? Very soon, with 3 O's.
Understand development challenges.
Our developers would hurt us.
Yeah, but consolidating not only your sales data, but your ad platform data. So if you can see Facebook ads and your Amazon ads and your Chirp ads and Google ads, whatever you're doing all in one place, you can start to see correlation. That'll lead you to causation. You can make better informed decisions on your marketing.
And that would be, for example, like today, the day we're recording this, I have a free Booksy for first free in series, and so when I look at the charts, you can kind of see, there's a difference.
Yeah,
and I'm applying that in my head right now, but being able to say, no, I ran this ad, or I've got this promo going on. Not only can I understand the impact and look when I'm looking at a chart, I can see that, but I also understand the cost, and that's the one thing we always forget is, you're making this much money, but here's the cost. And I want to make it clear to you that this wasn't free. This didn't just happen. There was something that had to happen, right? That you had to spend money on.
And that gets really complicated for an indie as well, because when we get our payments. So you ran that free Booksy in August, for example, and I'm assuming it's across multiple vendors. Yes.
Of course, it's all the vendors.
Right. But all those vendors are not going to pay you in the same month. So Scribecount makes it super easy. If you're on the dashboard's feature is, what are you earning in the calendar month? And then we have the payments tab so that you can always click that and not be confused. And I can go, so if I click my payments tab right now for August, it's showing me, for example, that Draft to Digital is paying me for July. It's not paying me for June, because for August, Amazon's paying me for June. And that gets I used to have to keep 3 or 4 different spreadsheets. So I say, get off the spreadsheet, get on the Sunburst.
Oh, I like that saying. Get off the spreadsheet.
Get off the spreadsheets, get on the Sunburst. And the Sunburst is super cool. It's a pie chart. And if I want to know more information about like my Draft to Digital sales, I click the wedge and it'll zoom in really cool, and it'll show me all my Draft to Digital sales. And if I ever want to go backwards, I just click the center of that Sunburst again, and I'm zoomed back out. So it's got this cool telescoping feature to it.
I think what I love about the Sunburst, and I know this was something that I love about Scribecount in general, is I started using it right away and I loved it. But I use Draft to Digital for a lot of my platforms. I go direct to 3, 4 of them, and then I use D2D for everything else. And I didn't want to see Draft to Digital because I don't make money off of Draft to Digital. I make money distributing from Draft to Digital to Apple and Nook and a bunch of library platforms, etc., and other retailers. So I wanted to see the actual downstream, because the other thing too is I also had some books direct, some through Smashwords, some through Draft to Digital, and it was kind of convoluted. I just wanted to know, these are my Apple sales. I don't care how it got to Apple. I just care that it's an Apple sale, for example. And lo and behold, the wonderful people at Scribecount took me seriously and gave us the choice. Do you want to see it by distributor, or do you want to see it by retail platform? And you have that option.
Yep.
And I think too that with all of us we're all like kind of class of 2010, 2011 here in terms of publishing. In 2011, none of us thought our empires would be this complicated, did we?
No, there was Smashwords and Amazon.
Yeah, that was pretty much it. So
Yeah.
if you have any listeners who are like early in their career listening to your podcast, I just want to reassure them that you may not have as complicated a situation as we're talking about right now, but we promise you'll get there in the next couple of years, and Scribecount will be there for you with our Sunburst to make it all easy.
Talk about the ability to quickly share a chart and go, look, here's my world map of where I'm selling. Here's my Sunburst that shows my my percentages, especially like, I do a lot of stuff in the Wide for the Win Facebook group, and it almost feels like, whereas on some of the other groups, all you're seeing is book report, because book report is just Amazon.
Yep.
And then on Wide for the Win, you're seeing the Sunburst so often, and people are like, oh, where's that beautiful chart from? Well, my friend, let me send you my affiliate link for Scribecount.
Yes, we love that.
Yeah, I mean, the Sunburst was we looked and looked for quite a while on what was going to be our main chart, and when we found that, it just clicked. But like going back to your free books example, if you run one, you're going to say, okay, where did those sales come from? Did they come from Amazon, or did they come from Barnes and Noble? You can quickly discern that just by clicking around on that chart. You can also see by territory, okay, they came from Barnes and Noble, but they were mostly in the UK. So I seem to have a good UK audience for that particular book. And maybe I should capitalize on that, run some more ads in that market, pull it back. But that's what I wanted to get to. And I mentioned that in our previous podcast, I have a 4 clicks policy. You should be able to drill from your entire library all the way down to a single book on a single platform in a single territory in 4 clicks or less. And that's what the Sunburst does for you. So you get that actionable information quickly. I got a heads up. Do I want to run another free booksy ad? Well, let me see. And how the last one did. Click, click, click. I got an answer in 5 minutes. I can go back to that email and say, yes, I do want to run another free booksy. It did really well for me on this platform in that country. So I'm going to see if I can build on that. And that gives you that actionable, information that we're all looking for. So cool. We're getting closer to our end goal.
So can you just summarize or share the different platforms that authors can expect to see in their Sunburst, in their handy dandy sexy dashboard?
Oh, sure. We started with the main 7, well, 6 actually. We started with Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Kobo, Google, and Apple. And then we added D2D, and then we tackled Smashwords. Not knocking Smashwords. Smashwords was a challenge because they're not only a platform, they are also a store.
Yeah.
They run coupons. They had a lot of unique features that we had to, it was a challenge, but we finally did get Smashwords up and running, and we learned a lot doing it. We learned a lot about how to do things, make them simpler, and where to look for stuff. Where is this data within this giant system? So once we find stuff, we now know how to interpret it better and how to display it better.
And from Draft to Digital, you have print too, which is really cool for me, because I do a lot of my print books through Draft to Digital, right?
Yep, we have print
and obviously KDP.
Yeah, and paperback and hardcover. So we're differentiating the 2 formats there as well. And there's some behind the scenes work going on with audio too. And when we're ready to do audio, it'll fall all at once.
And we have Ingram now too for paperback.
Yep.
Oh, so that'll be great too. So I'm getting my paper, because again, I use all 3 platforms. I use Ingram Spark. Well, I use Lightning Source too, because my very first.
We're working on Lightning Source. We're working on Lightning Source.
2004, right? It's just there. I think the first 2 books I did way back when, before there was a Spark. So I've got print books all over the map. But the other thing you guys added, which again, and this is something I needed, is I'm traditionally published as well, and you added the ability to go in and add sales. So for example, I sell a lot of things at in-person events, not so much in the last 2 years, but there, you go and do an in-person event, and I do the direct sales using the Square Reader and Cash and stuff like that. And so I have this other part of my business that is not represented on the Sunburst, but now I have the ability to add other income from other sources, whether it's traditionally published, whether it's self-published, but sales, direct sales. And I know part of BookFunnel too, right? Is some of those direct sales?
Yes.
A lot of indies are doing not just BookFunnel, but also Kickstarter and Patreon.
Yeah.
There's more platforms today than we ever, I think, imagined in 2011, 2012 to sell books or to make money as an indie author. It's just deciding which ones you want to specialize in.
Yeah.
I
So
think the list I have
to
now is 57 platforms long.
Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
That is amazing.
Mhm.
So
I'm sorry, Suresh forgot I was on a podcast and he's texting me.
see, the developer's supposed to be sleeping now at this time of
Yeah, they don't
day. But
sleep.
he's still working hard.
Yeah, we don't allow that. No.
But
That's not true. We do allow our people to sleep, just so that's not a recording that we have. They do sleep.
So with a tool like this, and I think this is the thing that still blows my mind, and I think I still, in side conversations, I'm like, guys, you're not charging enough for this. But how does the pricing structure work? Because surely this is going to cost me tens of thousands of dollars to have a tool so efficient and effective for me, right? To save me so much time. No?
We're authors first. And so one of the critical things I love about Scribecount is until you make $1,000, you don't pay anything for Scribecount. You're still building your business. We've all been there. We know what that's like. And then once you do cross the $1,000 threshold, you go into our first tier, which is $15 a month. Right. However, let's say you go over in June, for example.
Okay.
Are we charging you July 1st? Absolutely not. We, as authors, know you don't have that money in hand yet. It hasn't been paid to you yet. So that $15 that's due for June's, that you went over the $1,000 threshold, that's not due until you actually get payments for your June royalties.
Oh my God, you're waiting until the author gets the payment for that. That is so thoughtful.
Well,
it's almost like you're authors or something.
Yeah, we're authors first.
Yeah. If it's the first book and that happened,
you're not talking about I made $1,000 in total for all of my sales forever, which
no, just in the month of June.
Just for that month. That
right.
fiscal month or whatever.
Yeah, we don't penalize you. If you had a good month, if you managed to grab that book bub finally, and you had a good month, but you drop back down the next month, we're not going to penalize you for that. We're not going to.
So I only pay for the 1 month where I cracked $1,000 that month. And then it goes back to free if it's under 1,000, or obviously the higher the tiers, right? The higher the tiers, obviously the authors can afford it.
Sure, you can drop back down in tiers as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I hope they can afford $20 a month because that's where we max out right now. So if you, I think is it over $2,000, Randall?
For the max tier, yeah.
So the max tier, it's if you make over $2,000 in a month, then we are asking for $20 for our services.
Yeah.
So
well, most people, if they reach that point, they're opting for the yearly option anyway, which works out to about, I want to say just under $16.
Yeah, I was gonna say I think it was like 16, 17.
Which seems like a steal, especially if you're bringing in those kinds of figures too, right? You're like, yeah, of course, I pay more for my Adobe.
Yeah, it's cheaper than any other platform too.
Yeah,
so.
Yeah, Microsoft Office 365, that kind of stuff. You're looking at it, you're going, this is a very moderate expense.
I think our goals are to be the best service we can provide for authors in this class of accounting, information, sales data, your dashboard and everything, and also being one of the more affordable options as well.
Okay. Wow. I love that. So you've got some new developments. Obviously you're working on Ingram right now, or
yes, Ingram may launch today after we are done here. So we'll see if everything's ready.
Well, we're recording this in the middle of August, and it probably won't be live for another week or so, I'm guessing. So I hope even if things go wrong, it probably will be live by the time
it's looking good. Ingram was quite a challenge. Anybody who's familiar with their reporting structure, it's not very flexible. Very rigid.
They just fixed it recently, where I went, oh look, actual reports. I don't have to fill out a thing and wait for someone to send it in courier pigeon to get to me.
Right. And we actually pivoted greatly when they made that change, and it did make things quite a bit easier. So there's still a few little glitches we're working on. We do pull all the information, historical included, so you'll be able to go back in time and everything. Everything fits in the system very well. The only thing they don't provide are book covers to go with the data. So we pull all this data, but there's no cover. But if you are familiar with Scribecount, we have a merging function. So if you want to see your Ingram sales and your Amazon sales for the same book together, you hit that merge function, and it basically tells our software this book and this book at these two platforms are the same book. If you do that, it will pull the cover from the other platform and post it up. So we had to work around that. The other thing is, we refer to books as paperbacks, hardcovers, eBooks. That's basically what we want to know. Audio, they drill it down. So they tell you how many case laminate books you've sold and how many perfect bound books you've sold. So we had to do some interpretation there where, okay, this is not case laminate, this is hardcover, and this is not, so there's some interpretation involved there.
This is a slipcase ISBN as opposed to a case laminate, that kind of stuff. Yeah.
And a lot of authors, they have, I have two paperbacks. I have a regular, trade size, and then I have a mass market paperback.
Yeah.
We haven't found a way to differentiate those yet.
Well, technically, most indie authors will never have an actual mass market because the mass market is actually mass printed. It's mass market size. I like to remind people, but you know what your mass market is? eBooks are mass market.
Yeah,
that's right.
You can make as many. You can make 1 million in a split second if you want.
but there's two different prices.
Yeah, of course.
So they might see it and go, "Why is that paperback only $5.99?"
Yeah,
this
because
other one I sell,
it's like a 4.25 by 6 points.
Right. And we don't want to confuse people. We're trying to keep it as simple as possible. So right now, all your paperbacks will be lumped together, and all your hardbacks will be lumped together. And we're working on ways to filter that. But I think we run into your charts getting very confusing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
there's just too much to look at in one simple chart. So working on that. And of course, we expect a few bugs, but that's okay. That's okay. We have got the best early adopters. I say, guys, if you see something wrong, send a ticket. Oh boy, they send tickets. And that's great because we don't have to search for the stuff now. It's easier for us to fix it. So when we roll this out, we'll be asking for the same thing. And I'm hoping everybody, rolls with the difficulties we have and helps us get this thing perfected as soon as possible. So
fantastic.
I'm feeling good about it.
I guess what are some of the most common questions you have or things you would love a beginning author's like, I'm not sure if I'd want to try this out. What are some of the things you would say to them?
Something that was important to me as an author trying out this service was, sometimes I get a little bit nervous about who has my data and what are they going to do with it. So we have a very, very clear privacy policy where our data is not like my sales information is not mixed with yours, Mark, is not mixed with Randall's. Everything is kept segregated.
Because then mine would look like there's nothing there.
Nuh-uh. The point is that, we are not, as a company, we are not taking everyone's data and putting it all together. Even on the company side too, not everyone's able to see all the data or anything like that either. So
it's just for me to look at. It's for you to look at your own stuff. Yeah.
And it's for you to look at your own stuff. So I would tell someone who's new about this that it is definitely safe software that I kicked the tires. I checked under the hood. I looked in the trunk. They have all of my data. So I trust them with it. And I trusted them before I was even a member of the team. So that was what was important to me in terms of for my career. So I would tell new people about that. I also think that it's going to simplify a lot of things for new authors. And I am also developing a learning library over the next couple of months I was talking about. So I think there's a lot of information out there for beginning authors, but I'm going to really be tackling and looking into that stuff that mid-listers really need to how do you make that transition from being a newbie to a mid-lister. I think sometimes in those groups, it makes it seem like you're supposed to go from your first book to being a 6-figure author in the next 12 months. And that's a little...
Oh, that's cute.
Sure.
That's great.
It happened to us all.
Yeah. Remember our badges on keyboards and then the fish, say different levels, whether you're guppy or shark or I don't know.
Yeah. People jump around from now so often,
I think Scribecount's going to help with that. So like we were talking earlier, I think when we were talking about your free Booksy, for example, the marketing and everything, I want to make sure that we have the education there that our authors can immediately read an article, read a blog post, watch a video, and make better use of the reports that we have there. So they're making smarter business decisions.
Oh, that's cool. That's awesome.
If I could just add to that, the other thing I would tell a new author is we don't use your passwords.
Nope.
We don't have any passwords. There's no cookies involved. There's complete control between the three parties involved. There's your platform, there's you, and there's Scribecount. Any of these three people can sever the connection at any time they want. And the main thing also is if you do get concerned, if you think somebody may have pirated or broke into your own system, you can go to Scribecount and there's a big red button on the settings page that says delete my data.
Mhm.
You can hit that button and it will wipe whatever you have in our system clean.
Wow.
And you can do that anytime. So I wanted to make sure that everyone had control of their data and there were no passwords involved. So very safe in that regard.
Authors first.
Authors first. So for authors who may want to interact with you guys and chat, are you guys going to be coming to different conferences in the next little while? Where can people expect to see or find you or chat with you?
We are. The next conference is what? NINC. NINC
It
coming
is
up
NINC,
in
Florida.
21st of September.
Oh boy.
Elizabeth and I will both be there.
Mhm.
And we'll be talking and meeting and showing some stuff off.
May have to buy you drinks there and say thank you for Scribecount.
Oh, I think I owe you a few as well. So we'll just pass
We'll
the
be
bottle
buying
around.
drinks around.
Yeah, back and forth.
But that,
Take
what's after that would be 20 books. 20
It
books
is.
is November. So
20 bucks to 50K.
yep, we'll be presenting there as well. And I believe you will too, Mark. So we'll see you out there.
I may even mention Scribecount in my presentation about wide publishing.
You need anything, you let us know.
If you need charts, we've got you covered.
Oh,
Yep.
yeah.
We got screenshots. We got pictures.
And we
So
actually
there's that. And
we actually have that for anyone listening to this podcast. If you are presenting at a conference or something like that and they need help with your slides or anything, just shoot me an email. It's elizabeth.west@scribecount.com, and I'll make sure that you get whatever screenshots or whatever you need. Scribecount's happy to help presenters make sure they've got their data in a really pretty sunburst.
Very pretty sunburst.
Yes. And
Cool.
then looking at next year, we're actually, I just presented at RWA Nationals, but I'm already talking to them about presenting as well next year in July, and it's going to be in Anaheim, California. So we're going to go to Disneyland then.
Oh boy.
Yep.
Mhm.
Oh, in Disneyland, close to Disney World, I'll be doing Space Coast on the east coast of Florida there. I missed it this year. I got COVID the day before I was supposed to go.
Oh no.
And Terry, if you're out there, I'm sorry. I tried, but couldn't make it. So I felt bad about that, but I will definitely be there.
Well,
next
thanks
year.
for not going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was not a pleasant
Yeah.
week for me at all. But
What about you,
But
Mark?
yeah.
You'll be at NINC and
Yeah, I guess I'll see you both at NINC and 20
Vegas.
bucks. Yeah, cool. So I'll see you in two different sides of the continent. Now,
Okay.
where can people find you guys as writers online, and where can they find, of course, Scribecount online for more information?
My website is randallwoodauthor.com. I might have updated it a couple of years ago. Scribecount eats up all my time, so I haven't done a lot of writing or any. I think
Right.
I'm still picking away at some stuff on the side to keep myself sane. But yeah, Scribecount is pretty much the gig for me right now.
And Elizabeth, how about you?
I have elizabethanwest.com. I also have a brand new YouTube channel that I just started. That's Elizabeth Ann West. Yeah, we can talk about. We'll schedule another date, Mark, and I'll do all the skinny about starting a YouTube channel if you want to see the ins and outs of getting started with that. So I have that, the YouTube channel, and then scribecount.com, obviously, and I'm also on Facebook and Twitter. So pretty much, if you want to get in touch with me, I do check my direct messages and everything. So
Awesome. Well, I thank you guys so much for taking the time to chat with me today, and I look forward to seeing you guys in roughly a month.
yeah, at the Tiki Bar.
Yeah, about 30 days.
the Tiki Bar. The Flying Monkey, the Flying Bridge, or whatever.
Flying Bridge.
There you go.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Okay, so there's two things I kind of want to comment on or reflect on based on that interview, and the first is that importance of the we're authors first, or the author first connection of a company like Scribecount, and why that's just so important. It's one of the reasons why I was so thrilled to join the team at Draft2Digital, because it's an author-centric or an author-first platform. I know that every decision that's being made from the very top of the organization all the way through is about what's good for authors. And even things that could be good for authors and good for the company, if they're more good for the company and less good for authors, it's kind of like, well, I don't know if we want to do that. We want to do something that's for the authors. And if we happen to benefit from doing great things for authors, that works. And so with Scribecount, when you actually look at it, so you don't really get charged until you're making $1,000 per month. Most authors will never, ever make that money. So most authors out there could use Scribecount for free permanently. Now, there are plenty of authors. There's tens of thousands of authors that are making that much money and more, but having access to your data will help you get there. And so what I love about this is kind of like the way that Drafted Digital, says, hey, take your Word document, we'll help you format it for free, we'll do all this stuff, we'll distribute it to you. And if you make money, great, that'll help us, and et cetera. Same thing with Scribecount is, hey, use this tool, get yourself to a place where you can earn $1,000 or more a month, and then we'll start charging you. So you can really learn the ropes without having to spend a dime. And I absolutely adore that about it. And it obviously is built into the DNA. Randall and Elizabeth, both writers, both understand you're not going to be making $1,000 right off the bat. Yeah, of course, there's exceptions, and there's the 1% that just kind of knock it out of the park right away. But it took me quite a while to get to $1,000 a month. Now, I've been in the industry since 1992, and for many, many years, I'd be lucky to make $5,000 a year in my books. Now, I'm still only at the mid 5-figure level, so it's not like I'm knocking out of the park every single month, or I'm doing anything spectacular. I'm a mid-list author who's kind of working his way through the trenches, and I'm so lucky, so glad that I never had a breakaway runaway bestseller right out of the gate. Because if I had had that kind of huge success early on, and then I went back to, my long, slow climb and trajectory, I probably would have lost my patience. I wouldn't have had the patience that I have in the industry. So it's weird, but I'm grateful for not having hit a home run early on, that I've slowly worked my way up to where I am living a relatively comfortable existence as an author. And yeah, of course, I still have my part-time work that I do. And I do that, obviously, there's money involved in it, but I do it because I enjoy it, and I'm passionate about those things that I do. So again, I love my writing, I love the work that I do, and then money comes at the tail end of that. So again, that author-centric thing is one of the things I wanted to reflect on. And then the other thing was, I want to go back to Elizabeth and her Jane Austen historical romance fan fiction kind of books. And again, just a reminder that you can't write fan fiction for works that are in copyright, but because the Jane Eyre novels and the characters are not in copyright, she can do that and benefit from it. Otherwise, the type of fan fiction that you would want to write based on characters that are still in copyright, you can do on platforms like Wattpad, but you can't sell as an indie author. But anyway, so back to that. I love the fact that she sells her books at $9.99. Now, $9.99 is the cap Amazon forces on you to get 70%. None of the other retailers have that cap, but Amazon has it, so she's put it at $9.99. And she didn't just do it because she's cocky. She did it because she understands the market. And as she said, she understands what the market will bear. In her particular genre, which used to be serviced by overpriced, traditionally published books, and then they abandoned the market because their foresight is often not very foresighty, and they chase trends just like anyone else, but they're also not open to the niche markets because they're always looking for that runaway gigantic bestsellers. But in her niche, she knows that selling an ebook for $10 is still a good value because the people who want those stories, and $10 for that many hours of entertainment is still a steal. It's still cheaper than going to see a movie, which won't last as long as the books. So why am I reflecting on this? I'm reflecting on this because Elizabeth knows enough about the market that she priced her books at $10, and she didn't just follow what everyone else was doing. Well, everyone sets the price at $2.99 to $4.99, so I'm going to do that. No, she actually looked at it. She took a comprehensive look at her audience and really, really understood that. And that's something that we always forget to do. We look and see what other people are doing. We don't even acknowledge if it's the same genre or even the same kind of reader base. So that's something I want you to do as an author is when you're setting your price, when you're putting things into play in terms of your marketing, how do you do that? Do you actually do it with the consideration of who your audience is and what they're willing to spend and what they're looking for? Or are you just doing it because some other indie author had success with it, so you're just kind of following them? Instead of following the mob, you can follow what it is that you understand about your audience and your market. And that requires work. It's not easy. It's not like she knew that right away. She had to work at it. She had to figure this out. And it's working brilliantly for her. That's not to say that I'm suddenly going to go and price my books at $9.99, because I know within the market for my Canadian Werewolf series, for example, that may be a little bit too high, even though, yes, there's traditionally published books that are higher than that. But I know that the overall market has a flood of titles in this category, and so I'm needing to be a little bit more price sensitive in that particular genre. But with other genres, I don't have to be. And so that's just something I want to reflect on, and I want you, dear listener, to reflect on too. So that's it for this episode of the Stark Reflections podcast. Thank you so much for listening. One of the ways you can support this podcast is you can become a patron over at patreon.com/starkreflections, where you can join the awesome group of folks who support this podcast via their $1, $3, or $5 a month. And of course, get access to additional content. And I realize it's August 25th, 2022 as I'm recording this, and I realized two things I haven't done is I haven't shared the Hangout for my patrons, which should be in the feed in the next several days, but also the new Hangout, the August Hangout, I'm going to post that to Patreon, and so we can kind of hang out together and have another one of those conversations. That's just some of the bonuses. Of course, you don't have to support the podcast over at patreon.com, though I do say a huge, huge thank you to all my existing patrons. If you like the podcast, you can leave a review, and you can leave a review wherever you listen to this podcast. That would be greatly appreciated. That really, really helps people out, helps other people find the podcast. You can also share it on social media, share your own reflections to different episodes. And please tag me so I can acknowledge you in the comments, etc. and of course, just say thank you so much for doing that. But even better yet, share this podcast, this episode, other episodes of the podcast with someone that you think would find value in it. So, as I said, again, this is the end of episode 265. And so until next week and next episode, this is Mark Leslie Lefebvre wishing you great writing and good Stark Reflections.
Thank you for listening to the Stark Reflections podcast. You can find show notes for each episode at starkreflections.ca.
The music for this podcast, Laser Groove, was composed and produced by Kevin MacLeod. Check out more of Kevin's great music at incomptech.com.